His phone says he was in one place. His friends say he was somewhere else. That's not a rumor. That's what his own mother found when she went through his location history after he was gone. A discrepancy between where his phone said he'd been and where the people around him that night said he was. Then there's the Snapchat accounts. 2 of them. Both when investigators and family looked completely empty. And here's the part that should stop you. This isn't early speculation from day one. This is weeks in. After the body was found. After the interviews. After the video. After all of it, the sheriff is still standing in front of cameras saying the same thing. No evidence of a crime. Investigators have the phone. They have the video everyone's talking about. They have dozens of witness interviews. And they still can't tell you what happened to Nolan Wells. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why that gap exists, and exactly where the biggest hole in this case still sits. Because the answer isn't some hidden conspiracy. It's something much more uncomfortable. Sometimes the evidence just doesn't add up cleanly no matter how hard people look. If you want to actually understand this case instead of just scrolling past another headline about it, subscribe now because we're about to walk through every single piece of this from the very beginning. To understand that phone data, you have to go back to the start. Back before any of this was a case. Back when it was just a boat, a beach, and a holiday. Horn Island sits about 7 miles off the Mississippi coast. A barrier island you can only reach by boat, the kind of place that fills up every 4th of July with the same crowd it always has. Coolers, music, fireworks nobody asks permission for, a few hours of open sand before everyone heads back to shore. Nolan Xavier Wells made that crossing with a group of friends. Reporting places him there as part of the wider 4th of July gathering, one more teenager in a summer crowd, on a day that isn't supposed to be remarkable enough to pick apart afterward. But at some point that day, Nolan is seen for the last time by the people who knew him. Nobody flags it as significant in the moment. Why would they? It's just a guy at a beach with his friends. Nobody's watching the clock. Nobody's taking notes. It's only afterward, once investigators start asking exactly this question over and over to everyone who was there, that this moment becomes the last confirmed sighting anyone can pin down. And the accounts of what happened after it don't fully line up. Different people who were there tell it differently. Somewhere in that gap, between the last time anyone's sure they saw him and the moment the day was supposed to end, something shifts. Nolan doesn't come home that night. The 4th of July everyone remembers splits into 2 versions from here, the ordinary day it was supposed to be, and the day it turned out to be instead. Everything that follows is an attempt to figure out which one is true. Christine Wansley waited as long as a mother can wait. Then she made the call no parent wants to make on a holiday night. Nolan wasn't home. He wasn't answering. And whatever version of he's just out late with friends, she'd been telling herself stopped holding up. She reported him missing on July 4th, and from that point on, this stopped being a family's private worry and became something bigger, a search. What followed was a multi-agency response. Local authorities, search teams, people combing an island that's only reachable by boat, looking for a teenager who was there 1 hour and then, as far as anyone could confirm, wasn't there the next. Searches like this move fast and slow at the same time. Fast because every hour matters, slow because a barrier island isn't a neighborhood you can canvass door to door. There's water. There's tide. There's a lot of sand that looks the same in every direction. And this is where the story stops being simple. Because as investigators started talking to the people who'd been on that boat trip, the accounts didn't match up cleanly. Who was with Nolan? Whether he got back on the boat with everyone else? What happened to his phone and when? These aren't wild internet theories. These are the specific reported inconsistencies that surfaced in the earliest interviews, the kind of gaps that make an investigator's job harder, not easier. Conflicting accounts sound like someone's lying. Often they just mean nobody was paying attention to the same thing at the same moment. Memory is unreliable even when nobody has a reason to hide anything. Investigators have to work through both possibilities at once, and at this stage, nobody outside the investigation actually knows which one they're dealing with. For 2 days, that's where things sat. A missing 18-year-old. A search spreading across an island. A handful of accounts that didn't fully line up. And a family waiting for news that, with every hour, felt less and less likely to be good. On July 6th, the search ended the way families dread most. Authorities recovered a body near the area where Nolan had last been seen, close to Horn Island. It was believed to be his. For 2 days the case had been about finding him. Now, in the space of a single update, it became about something else entirely, not where is he but what happened to him. That shift, from search to grief, is the hardest moment in any case like this. A search is still built on hope, however thin. The moment a body is recovered, that hope collapses into grief, And grief for a family like Nolan's doesn't come with answers attached. It comes with more questions than they had the day before. Almost immediately, the case moved into a new phase. Not where is he, but what happened. And this is where the sheriff's office made a statement that would end up defining the entire case for weeks to come, not because it revealed something but because of what it didn't reveal. Investigators said publicly that they had not found evidence of a crime. The case remained open. Active. Nothing had been ruled out and nothing had been confirmed. For a public that had just watched a missing person search turn into a body recovery, that statement landed strangely, too calm almost for what had just happened. No confirmation of foul play. No confirmation it wasn't. Just, we don't know yet and we're still looking. The distance between what had just happened and how little the official response actually said, that's exactly what opened the door for everything that came next. The family's questions. The public's questions. The video. The phone data. All of it grew out of that same uncomfortable space. A body found and an official record that at this stage said almost nothing at all. Grief and distrust often arrive together, and for Nolan's family, they arrived almost at the same time. Within days of the body being recovered, the family retained attorney Ben Crump, a name that, by now, most people recognize from other cases where families felt like the official process wasn't moving fast enough, or wasn't being straight with them. Bringing in Crump is never a neutral act. It's a signal. It says, we don't fully trust that this is going to be handled the way it should be, and we want someone in the room who will hold the process accountable. Alongside Crump, the family also announced they were arranging an independent autopsy. One conducted outside Mississippi, away from the same officials whose early, no evidence of a crime statement had already left them uneasy. That detail matters, and it's worth explaining rather than just reporting. Families request independent autopsies for a lot of reasons that don't require assuming wrongdoing by anyone. Sometimes it's about wanting a second set of eyes on cause of death findings. Sometimes it's about not trusting the timeline of an official process. Sometimes it's simply about a family needing to feel like they did everything they could, so that if answers do come later, they know they didn't leave any stone unturned. None of that requires assuming the local investigation did something wrong. It's a trust gap, not necessarily an accusation. That independent autopsy was reported to be completed in Washington, D.C. And in a detail that added another layer of public attention to the case, former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick was reported to have helped fund it. Then came the press conference. Nolan's family stood alongside Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton, calling publicly for a transparent investigation. This is the moment where the case stopped being a regional news story and became something much bigger, the kind of story that spreads because people recognize the shape of it. A family that feels like the system might not move for them the way it would for someone else, standing in front of cameras and asking, simply, to be taken seriously. It's important to say plainly, none of this, the attorney, the independent autopsy, the press conference, proves that anything improper happened in the original investigation. What it proves is a trust gap, not an accusation. Those are two different things, and the difference matters for everything that follows. This is the part of the case that's hardest to watch, and it's exactly why we're not skipping anything. Drop a comment with what you think investigators are missing, and stick around because the next section is where the real contradictions show up. This is the part of the case people actually want to understand, not the emotion, not the press conferences, but the actual material investigators are working with. So let's go through it the same way, piece by piece. What's been reported, what it would need to prove, and what's still missing. At some point during the Horn Island gathering, a video was recorded that later spread widely online. Reporting describes it as appearing to show some kind of confrontation on the island that day. Investigators have said they're reviewing it as part of the case. Here's what that video would need to do to matter. It would need to be authenticated, placed at a confirmed time relative to Nolan's last sighting, and tied directly to what happened to him afterward. That's a high bar, and it's one the public reporting says hasn't been cleared. As of the most recent statements, authorities had not confirmed the video's authenticity or established a direct connection between it and Nolan's death. So what's missing is the connective tissue, the thing that would take this from a video that shows tension on the island that day, to a video that shows what happened to Nolan. Right now, it's the first thing not confirmed to be the second. This is the detail we opened on, and it's the one that seems to unsettle people the most, because it feels concrete in a way rumors don't. Nolan's mother has said his phone was tracked through Life 360, and that the location data it showed didn't match what friends were describing seeing on Snapchat around the same time. On top of that, both of his Snapchat accounts were reportedly found empty. No stored content, nothing to review. For this to actually mean something, investigators would need a verified timeline of the phone's real location. Not just app-based tracking, which can lag, glitch, or be affected by things as mundane as a dead battery or a phone left behind, and match that against verified accounts of where Nolan physically was. It would also need some understanding of why the Snapchat accounts were empty, deleted by someone, or simply accounts that never stored content in the first place, which happens more often than people assume, since a lot of Snapchat activity doesn't save by default. Right now, based on public reporting, investigators haven't said which it is. It could be one. It could be the other. What nobody's explained yet is that context. A discrepancy in location data is real, but on its own, it's not proof of concealment. Authorities have said they interviewed several of Nolan's friends and other witnesses who were present that day, with additional interviews continuing as the case moves forward. One detail that surfaced publicly: a judge, Ashley Cole, spoke about her son being interviewed by investigators and said he cooperated fully, an example of how, at least in some cases, individuals connected to that day have been willing to go on record. What this would need to prove: a consistent, corroborated account of the day, one that either fills the gaps in the timeline or clearly identifies where and why the accounts diverge. What's missing? Exactly that consistency. Reporting describes the accounts as not fully lining up, not necessarily because someone is lying, but because that's often just what happens when a group of people are asked to reconstruct a chaotic day after the fact. Investigators are still working through which parts of those accounts are reliable. None of these three things, the video, the phone data, the interviews, currently add up to a confirmed explanation of what happened to Nolan Wells. Each one is a real, reported piece of unresolved evidence. Each one could matter enormously or could turn out to be a dead end. That's not investigators hiding something. That's what an active investigation with incomplete evidence actually looks like from the outside. Messy and less satisfying than true crime content usually makes it feel. Strip away the press conferences, the video, the phone data, and here's what's actually been officially confirmed at this stage. Not much. No cause of death has been made public. The state medical examiner completed an autopsy, but the cause and manner of death haven't been released. Toxicology results, the kind of forensic detail that could settle basic questions about what happened to Nolan in the water, are still pending, and results like that can take weeks, sometimes longer if specialized panels are needed. No suspect has been named, because investigators have said publicly they don't have evidence of a crime. The sheriff's office has said they believe Wells drowned, but that's described as a working theory, not a confirmed finding, and it's one his own parents have pushed back on, given that Crump has said Nolan was reported to be a strong swimmer. That's the real story here, and it's easy to miss because it's the least dramatic part. This case has generated an enormous amount of public attention. National headlines, a press conference with a civil rights attorney and Reverend Al Sharpton, millions of views across social platforms, while the actual official record remains remarkably thin. A missing persons report. A body recovered. An autopsy with no released findings. A sheriff saying more than once that the investigation is ongoing. That gap, between how big this has gotten publicly and how little has actually been confirmed officially, is exactly the space where speculation grows. And it has grown. Online, theories have moved faster than the evidence ever could, filling in the blanks the official record has left open. Some of that is people genuinely trying to make sense of a tragedy. Some of it is the internet doing what it does with any case that has an emotional hook and missing information. Here's the distinction that matters. People asking questions isn't the problem. Treating a guess as a fact is. Right now, the honest answer to what happened to Nolan Wells is still, we don't fully know. Investigators don't know. The family doesn't know. That's not a satisfying answer, but it's the true one, and it's exactly why this case isn't over. As of the most recent reporting, the investigation remains open. The independent autopsy, conducted in Washington, D.C. and funded with help from Colin Kaepernick, was expected to produce results in the days following the family's press conference, but as of now, those findings haven't been publicly released. Ben Crump has said the family intends to make the results public once they have them, framing it as part of the transparency they've been asking for from the start. Investigators, meanwhile, are still asking the public for help, specifically for photos and videos from Horn Island on July 4th, especially anything showing Nolan or any argument, disturbance, or altercation on the island that day. That request alone tells you something about where the case actually stands. Not wrapped up, not close to a conclusion, still actively trying to fill in a timeline that has real gaps in it. And underneath all of it is a family that's still waiting. Christine Wansley has said plainly that she just wants to know what happened and why her son didn't come home. That's the part of this story that doesn't need speculation, doesn't need theories, doesn't need a viral video to make it land. A mother is waiting for an answer that, as of today, nobody can fully give her. That's where this case sits right now. Not solved. Not closed. Still open, still being worked, with a family and a community waiting for the official record to finally catch up to the questions everyone's been asking since July 4th. This case isn't finished, not by a long shot. The independent autopsy results, a possible cause of death, whatever investigators find when they go through those photos and videos people are sending in, all of that is still coming. And when it does, we're not going to be the channel that jumps to conclusions or repeats whatever's trending that day. We're going to break it down exactly like this. Fact by fact, source by source, no speculation dressed up as certainty. So if you want to actually know what happened to Nolan Wells when the real answers come out, instead of getting it secondhand from someone who didn't do the reading, subscribe, turn on notifications, and be here when this case gets its next real update. Because it's coming and you're going to want to understand it properly the first time.